If you got a Bible, we're going to be in the book of Jude, Jude chapter 1. If you're new to the Bible, there's only one chapter in the book of Jude, and it is so small you'll go right past it. So here's what you want to do. Go to the very last book of the Bible, that's the book of Revelation, with no S, Revelation, no S, and then go back one book, that's the book of Jude. So go to Revelation, turn back one book, that's the book of Jude. And it's one of those often overlooked books, but it's rich and full of super practical help for us today, which is why we're doing it in our church, going through it line by line, verse by verse. And I've just really been blessed by the journey so far. And it's really, really relevant to what we're facing right now as a culture. And to try to help you see that, I want you to, in your mind's eye, go back to a different time in our history, not American history, but we were involved to some degree in the First Great War. I want you to imagine if you're a German citizen in Germany right after the First Great War. You are watching a brand new republic come to fruition called the Weimar Republic. And though the military had still had pretty large amount of power and influence, they were pretty well hated by the people. They had been humiliated in the war. And so there was no real consensus whatsoever in terms of the democracy that was trying to come together. And they struggled to try to make something happen, really from the inception all the way till it fell apart under Adolf Hitler. They were facing a variety of challenges on a variety of fronts. They had economic problems in that inflation was getting out of control. It got to the point where the money that they used to use as a currency of exchange became more useful as wallpaper for, decorations at your house. They had cultural disintegration in that things like the family, churches, not just Christian churches, but all across the board were becoming, attacked, alienated, marginalized, less and less influential. With the churches came the rejection of a lot of shared spaces, which brought the third front, which is a political front. You had extremism mounting on both sides, both the left and the right. There was no middle much anymore, just like there was no shared spaces. You were either hardcore left wing or hardcore right wing, and political violence began to increase as a result. I think I read about 12,000 deaths just from their skirmishes in the street. 400 plus political assassinations during the days of the Weimar Republic, just increasingly violent, and justifications for worse and worse behavior. And then the last thing that they had was a moral disintegration, in that what was normally a sexual taboo or morally off limits became more and more normalized. Berlin became the center of sexual experimentation. You had things, not just the bending of gender roles, which is what this piece of art represents, pretty popular artists during the Weimar Republic, but you also had things like transgenderism, homosexuality, and all sorts of other sexual taboos normalized, and then increasingly taboo behavior that was up on the edges. And so gradually this fledgling republic became more and more prone to dreamers rising up and casting a vision for something better, an alternative that would get rid of all of the chaos and brokenness and pave the way for something better. And people were listening. They were willing for a strong man to rise to power and lead Germany out of their misery. And one of those dreamers was a man named Adolf Hitler. Many of you will know that name. You'll be familiar with World War II and the Third Reich and all the things that he did. He was able to persuade the masses in part because things had gotten so culturally disintegrated. He effectively deconstructed that culture. He criticized it and then projected a vision for something better. And on the surface promised a lot of great things, like economic prosperity and political integrity and moral rigidity and reclaiming moral virtues and all of these things. But what he ultimately ended up producing was a government that was tyrannical, evil, abusive, and inflicted the worst horrors that we've seen in history up until that point and thereafter, which is what this picture, of course, represents. And that dreamer, Adolf Hitler, was proclaiming these dreams as coming from the Lord. I don't believe he was a Christian, but he was using religious-like language, but those dreams were not from the Lord. They were demonically inspired. And it's a reminder, I think, for us today that not every dream comes from the Lord. There are dreams that have a demonic inspiration, and often in seasons where a culture is in crisis, it creates a platform for these dreamers to come up to the surface and cast a vision for something different, an alternative to what is. You saw a lot of this during COVID 2020. YouTube prophets were a dime a dozen, casting visions for this and that, and many of them were a joke. But we are facing many of the same crises that they faced in the Weimar Republic, in that we're economically uncertain. If you've ever studied our economic system, you know it's a balancing act between a variety of different forces, and all it takes is for one thing to go wrong, actually more than one. You need about 4 things to go wrong in just the right way, and then, and then we're all having fun. There is economic uncertainty. There is political polarization in our culture today. There are extremists on both sides. The middle is disappearing, and political violence is becoming increasingly justified. You had a couple assassination attempts on President Trump, and then he's not the only one. You've got violence against Democratic politicians and violence against Republican politicians, and it's becoming normalized in that it's not that surprising when it happens anymore. You have cultural disintegration in that the institutions we once appealed to for stability and normality are being undermined and ostracized. Things like the family, education, arts, entertainment, they're all attacking traditional norms and values, and as a result, what was normally taboo is becoming normalized, and we're coming up with even crazier taboos to exist on the peripheries. There is cultural disintegration, moral degradation, political extremism, and economic uncertainty, and so what we have today is not that different from what they faced back then. And those dreamers that rise up in those kinds of environments often are pushing dreams that are not from the Lord, but are in fact a doorway to real life destruction, real life devastation. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because these happenings, this is a cycle that seems to repeat itself over and over again throughout human history. And so it is no surprise that this cycle gets addressed in the New Testament. And not only does Jude identify these kind of dreamers and the cause or the outcomes that they produce as a result of their dreams, he kind of paints with this beautiful broad stroke so that we today can identify these dreams when they come to the surface and identify these dreamers so that we can disassociate ourselves from their agendas. And that's what I want us to do with our time this morning in Jude chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. If you're new to the book of Jude, he's writing, it's really a strong letter. It's really short, but it's really strong. He wanted to write a feel-good sermon. Instead, he wrote a letter identifying some people in the church who professed faith, but were in fact apostate, in that they did not follow Jesus, they did not submit to any kind of authority, and they were co-opting Christians into their movement and leading them to their death and destruction. And so he writes to expose those bad hombres in the church and to call them to contend for the faith once delivered. Last week he pulled out 3 illustrations from the Old Testament to give them a history lesson of what God does with this kind of a rebellious spirit. And then this week he's going to call them out proper on their current day behavior. So he says, in the same way, verse 8, in the same way, these people, that's his designation for these people, those people, relying on their dreams, defile their flesh. They reject authority, and they slander the glorious ones. Yet when Michael, the archangel, was disputing with the devil in an argument about Moses' body, he did not dare utter a slanderous condemnation, but he said, "The Lord rebuke you." That's such a fun phrase to say. The Lord rebuke you. But these people, no, they blaspheme anything they do not understand, and what they do understand by instinct, like irrational animals, by these things they are destroyed. The more I study Jude, think of it like one of those Amazon sponges you get in a super tightly packed in a super tight little plastic package, and then when you cut the plastic, the sponge goes poof, like that. You guys ever bought one of those? Or those rags? You put a little water in the rag and this poof, it just gets bigger and bigger. That's what I feel about the book of Jude. Tiny, itty bitty little book, and then when you scratch it, poof, it just blows up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's written by, I think, a very gifted author. He uses these triads. He organizes it very brilliantly. And there is like a densely condensed, deep theological truth in a short amount of verses. So I just want to focus on verse 8 this morning because it is explaining what these dreamers look like and what these dreams produce. First, what do these dreamers look like? Or what do these dreamers produce? A lot of it can be summed up in the word itself. He calls them dreamers. King James Version says, filthy dreamers. It's kind of a fun thing to say. Although I don't think that's the best translation because their dreams were not of a sexual nature. Some would say that's true. Others would say, no, these are dreamers like Joseph Smith was a dreamer and he dreamed up Islam. Or, no, he didn't. Joseph Smith dreamed up Mormonism. Or it's like Muhammad who dreamed up Islam. So dreamers would be this idea of they get up on the mountain and they have an encounter with God and they just kind of dictate what God gives to them. And so they're dreamers in that sense. And some would say that's what's going on in Jude. You have these false teachers, these Gnostics, and they're getting divine revelation. It's really demonic revelation, doctrines of demons, and they're leading people astray. That's possible. More likely, from my opinion, is that these are dreamers in the same sense if you were 4'6", 18 years old, saying to your mom and dad, I'm going to be the next Michael Jordan kind of dreamer. You would say, you got to be kidding me. You're dreaming. The emoji we might use to communicate this today would be clown world. You're living in clown world. You got to be kidding me. You're living as if 2 + 2 = 5 when you know good and well 2 + 2 = 4. And that's what these people were doing. I'm assuming these are Jewish zealots, which in that culture, they were a political movement of Jewish people who wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire. They wanted to get rid of Nero, and they were co-opting, in this case, Christians to join their ranks, Jewish Christians who were Jewish converts, let's put it that way. Hey, join our ranks. We know you love Israel. We know you want to see the Messiah come, so let's bring it about ourselves. Let's murder these Romans, and so Jesus can come back. And they were dreaming in that, thinking that that was going to be a successful mission, because obviously it would not be. Rome was incredibly large and powerful. They were ruthless, and ultimately, when they did mount their offensive in 66 AD, Rome crushed them with a boot and destroyed the temple a few years later. They were crazy to think that this would be the case, and that's what I think he means by dreamers. And that's what every godless dream is like. Godless dreams leave the dreamers deluded and detached from reality. And it never starts out in your face, 2 + 2 = 5. It usually starts out 2 + 2 = 4, except in certain cases when it equals 4.1 or 4.6, with this in place, and they nuance it to death and play around on the edges. It's 95% true, but the 5% that's false is hard to determine. And then with those gradual compromises, they lead their dreamers astray further and further from reality as it actually exists. And that's what you see happen in our culture today. Godless dreams distort what is true. They leave their dreamers deluded and detached from reality. One of my favorite commentators says, reality gets a vote, and its vote always wins. And that's so true. You can put yourself in a pretend world where you distort what is true, but you don't get to decide what is the real world. God gets to decide what the real world is, and he created the real world to operate according to real laws that do not change because he doesn't change. And when your fake world collides with the real world, it's going to be a painful collision, and that's what these godless dreams produce. And it happens in all sorts of ways today. It's not outright atheism. Outright atheism is easy to spot. It's the practical atheism that a lot of ideologies move the ball forward today. There's cultural atheism. There's practical atheism. There's cultural forms of Marxism, which at root is an atheistic kind of political ideology, or not political, economic ideology. You can apply it in politics with a kind of cultural Marxism. They all have the ultimate outcome of creating a world that doesn't match the real world. And then those who are devoted to that false version of reality, or that warped version of reality, advance interest and engage in behavior that is going to create a collision with the real world when it comes to bear. So you want to beware. You want to reject any dream that distorts the truth. If it's saying 2 + 2 = 5 or 4.1, you want to avoid it, just like these Christians were avoiding these people. Second thing it does, it says they defile the flesh, they reject authority, and they slander the glorious ones. Godless dreams don't only deceive their dreamers, they also debase their dreamers. They debase their dreamers, and they are defiled by their actions. In the CSB, it says they defile their flesh. A lot of people hear the word flesh, and they immediately think either something sexual or something spiritual. And sometimes it is. Sometimes the flesh is like a fleshly desire, like a sensual desire. Sometimes the word flesh means unspiritual. Like a fleshly person is focused on the world. He's carnal. He's earthly focused. He's not spiritual, and that he doesn't think about God. But when Jude uses the word flesh, he doesn't mean it in either of those ways. He just means it as another human person. You know this because in verse 6 he says they went after strange flesh, meaning they tried to have sexual relations with someone who was not their spouse. So when he says they're defiling their flesh, what he means is they are corrupting their souls. They are no longer people of integrity because through their actions they have compromised themselves. This language is used of the zealots by Josephus, believe it or not. He doesn't say they defile the flesh, he says they defile the temple. And the way that they defile the temple is they were engaging in murder and very violent activities in the Jewish temple because that was the place where the Romans would least expect it. What do you call that? That's just wrong, right? To engage in guerrilla warfare, to deceive the people you are attacking and turning a house of worship into a theater of war, that lacks integrity. And yet these zealots were saying it's okay because our ends are noble. We're trying to liberate the Jews, so who cares if we have to compromise our ethics to get it done? And that's why I would say they are debased. The kids these days, they like the word based. I see it all the time on social media. Man, that's based. You're based. As far as I can tell, it means a person of integrity, a person who does what they say, a person who doesn't budge on what they think is right or wrong. That is based. Well, if you are debased, what that means is the opposite of that. You are fluid in your morality. You may think it's right, but you may think it's wrong, but you'll engage in the behavior if something else is right. You're morally ambiguous. You're unpredictable. And that is what these people had become in pursuit of their dreams. And maybe their dreams were noble. We want to liberate the Jews. We want to bring about the Messiah. But in bringing about a good goal, they were engaging in terrible behavior. They were debased. And we do the same thing today. And we do it for the same reasons today. It's in pursuit of a godless dream. You'll think to yourself, well, I know it's wrong, but I'm the exception. I know technically speaking, I shouldn't be doing this, but this is the only way I can make this happen, and God would want me to have that. God would want this result. And so I'm going to engage in something I know is wrong because it's just got to be done for me to have what I want. It's kind of like Harvey Dent. You guys ever watch the Batman movies? When Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight says is he talking to Batman or Gordon? I can't remember. But he says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the... Y'all haven't seen it. Okay. You live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Okay? And even Batman, when he's talking with Alfred, I'm a total nerd, I get that. When Batman is talking to Alfred about the Joker, I think it's a Joker, maybe it's Bane, I can't remember. He's like, I know what I must do to beat someone like him. And so he's going to quit because he doesn't want to become evil Batman to defeat the evil Bane because he thinks I got to be evil to defeat the evil, when that's not true. You can't become evil to defeat evil. You have to stay good to defeat evil. And these people were becoming evil to defeat evil. And he's saying that is tempting. That is inevitable if you're living in a godless dream. So be careful the dreams you pursue, because if your dream that you're pursuing that is chasing a noble goal, freedom, self-discovery, wealth, family, prosperity, if in pursuit of that dream you have to compromise your integrity, you have to debase your morality, you have to put yourself in situations where you are humiliated by your behavior, it is not a dream from the Lord. That is a dream from the pit of hell, and it will produce negative fruit in your life in due season. So reject any dream that causes you to depart from the good. They deceive their listeners, they distort the truth, they debase their listeners and depart from the good. Thirdly, they reject authority. This word reject just means to declare invalid. We don't know whose authority it is. Some say it's angelic authority. Some say it's the authority of Jesus Christ, which is, probable given verse 4. Some say it's the Roman authority. The problem is Jude doesn't specify whose authority they reject, which makes me think he's painting in a broad brush to convey this spirit of anti-authoritarianism, which in some ways is a very sympathetic thing for Americans. Like, we're kind of anti-authoritarian. No strings on me. Or what is the phrase? Don't tread on me. There you go, little snake. And I'm right there with you. Redneck all the way. Second Amendment, baby. Don't tread on me. But that spirit, here's what I'm saying. That spirit, in the context of a godless dream, can lead you to places spiritually that destroy your life. Because the assumption behind that spirit is you are not a person under authority. That authority does not apply to you, which is what these zealots were saying. They're saying we don't have to obey the government because the government is corrupt. Well, that sounds common. I hear that all the time today. I don't have to pay my taxes. My taxes are theft. Every person in authority should also be a person under authority. If you're going to be a good dad, you need to know how to be a good son. If you're going to be an effective pastor, you need to be a pastor that's accountable to your congregation, accountable to a board who oversees you. Why? Because you're only one man. You can only see what you can see. You have blind spots. You have sinful dispositions. You need to be under authority. So the spirit that says, I am a law unto myself, I do not have to be, nor should I ever be, under authority, is a dangerous spirit. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. It can be as simple as, you don't get to tell me what to do. Hey, you forfeit the right to speak into my life when maybe, I can get why you might feel that way, but beware of that spirit that cuts you off from accountability in your life. Because maybe they don't see perfectly, and maybe they are not morally having the high ground, but it doesn't preclude you from needing wisdom that you don't have in and of yourselves. Beware of reject any dream that forces you to deny accountability. You need accountability. I need accountability. We all need accountability, but there is a kind of dream that comes from hell that says you don't. You're the exception to the norm. You're the kind of 16-year-old who doesn't have to listen to their parents. Or you're the type of CEO who is a law unto yourself. Be careful. That dream will not take you where you think it's taking you. And theologically, any kind of religious dogma that says God really doesn't care how you live, Jesus really doesn't have demands for your sexuality and with your body and what you put in your body, it's all just kind of free for all, and God is just your friend forever, an advisor if you ask, but only if he ever disagrees with you, you're right, he's wrong. That kind of Americanized therapeutic deism is a demonic deception. It's not the God of the Bible. It's a godless dream that's going to produce a devastating result. Real life harm. In their case, they literally died. These Jews literally died. These Christians literally died. In our case, it can create all kinds of chaos culturally and personally. So they were deluded, they were debased, defiant, and lastly, they defamed God's glory. Verse 8, they slander the glorious ones. This word slander, interesting word. Some of your translations will say that they speak evil of dignitaries. Does anyone's translation say that? Some other translations will say they do this differently because it's such a hard thing to translate. If you read it literally in the Greek New Testament, it says they blaspheme glory. Blaspheme doxa. They insert glorious ones to make it sound like they're angels, that they're blaspheming the angels. That's because the context, you have angels below, angels above, maybe it's angels. The big idea is that they're rebelling against God's divine order, which has these hierarchies of angels. I don't know. I would just take it as they belittle or they diminish the glory of God. When we just sang that song that comes right from the book of Jude, the last song that we sang, unto him be all glory, be all power, dominion, all authority is yours, now and forevermore. Godless dreams come along and they say, God is good, but maybe you're taking it too far, and if you thought of it differently, then we wouldn't be so bad off. Think of this like with progressive Christianity. They say that liberal Christianity has a God without wrath, brings men without sin into a kingdom without judgment through the ministry of a Christ without a cross. There it is. Reinhold Niebuhr. What are they doing? They're diminishing God's glory. They're diminishing the severity of sin. They're amplifying human dignity, that you can't do wrong. We're not sinful by nature. They're diminishing glory and they're elevating depravity. That's what these people were doing. And that's what godless dreams do. Yeah, God is, but let's take that down a notch and let's bring this up a notch so that the way we want to do things is justified and we can get away with it. And again, you see that everywhere today. It's all over our culture. Diminishing biblical vision for marriage, a biblical vision for sexuality, a biblical vision for finance, a biblical vision for running your business. You increase and God decreases. Instead of John the Baptist who said, no, I must decrease so that Christ may increase. They had it backwards. And as a result, they were leading their people to destruction. So if that's what godless dreams look like and if that's what they do, then how do you get out of it? If you're living your life in a dream that doesn't come from God, and you know that because, well, I've been compromising my integrity and I've been kind of acting as though I'm not an authority, as if I'm not accountable, and I'm just kind of a law unto myself. If you would say I am guilty of thinking and living that operates according to those kinds of descriptions, how do you get out of that kind of a nightmare before it destroys your life? And maybe it already has begun to destroy your life, but before you get too far gone, how do you get out of it? That's what he talks about in verse 9. And he does it by contrasting these godless dreamers with Michael the archangel. In verse 9 he says, when Michael the archangel was disputing with the devil in an argument about Moses' body, he, Michael, did not dare utter a slanderous condemnation against the devil, but he said, the Lord rebuke you. I've been saying that to my kids all week. The Lord rebuke you. It's real fun. Dad, can I have some chocolate milk? The Lord rebuke you. They just look confused. Do you guys remember this story in the Old Testament about Michael having the argument with the devil about the body of Moses? It's because it's not in there. Yeah, there is no story in the Bible about Michael the archangel debating with the devil about the body of Moses. Jude does this. Jude did this last week when Jude appealed to the book of 1 Enoch, which is a big book that fills in the gaps of a biblical story in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. It's called The Watchers. This is not 1 Enoch. This is an external source, not the Bible, but it is a Jewish document that Jewish men and women would have known and read and be very familiar with. It's called the Testament of Moses. Some people call it the Assumption of Moses. It's tit for tat. Tomato, tomato. The reason that the Testament of Moses became popular is because the Bible leaves a gap between what happened to Moses after he died. If you read the death of Moses in Deuteronomy, it's at the very end of the book, Deuteronomy 34, it says that Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab according to the Lord's word, and he, who's he? We don't know. He, God, angel, somebody, buried Moses in the valley in the land of Moab facing the Beth Peor, and no one to this day knows where his grave is. This is how you make a conspiracy theory. A lack of knowledge and creativity. The sky's the limit. And that's exactly what happened. All sorts of legends began to crop up about the body of Moses. Where's Moses? Well, we don't know. Nobody knows where his grave is, so maybe he's with Elvis, I'm just kidding. They didn't say that. They did say maybe he's in heaven. Maybe he's like Enoch. Enoch didn't die. He has no grave. Enoch just went up to heaven. And then others would say, no, it wasn't. He's not alive. He's dead because the Bible said he died. But Michael, the archangel, buried him. That's the he. It's referring to Michael, the archangel. Some say God buried him. Some say Jesus buried him. But Jude believed that Michael, the archangel, buried him because Jude is quoting the Testament of Moses, and the Testament of Moses presumes that Moses was buried by Michael, or at least some of the angels. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, because I can't know that because I've read the Testament of Moses. I have not read that conversation in the Testament of Moses because there are 0 manuscripts that exist today of that conversation in the Testament of Moses, which is kind of inconvenient. There's no surviving manuscripts. But what we do have is we have surviving manuscripts of church fathers who were quoting the Testament of Moses, and you can patch together by their quotations what the conversation between Michael and Satan was in the Testament of Moses, and that's what this is. This is a piecing together based on quotations from the church fathers in the first century of what this document said. And here's what it says. When Moses died on the mountain, Michael was sent to remove the body. And when the devil slandered Moses, proclaiming him a murderer because he smote the Egyptian. You guys remember that from the movie when Moses got mad and he killed the Egyptian guy because you're mistreating my people? Well, Satan is like, you're a murderer. You can't go to heaven. And Michael's like, you're the devil. You don't get a vote, He got really angry. The devil accuses him of being a murderer, and the angel, not tolerating the slander against him, said to the devil, may God rebuke you. There's our phrase. Look at this a little later. Michael, since he lacked the authority, I was about to say underline that. You don't have a copy of the Testament of Moses. Michael, since he lacked the authority, did not bring upon him, that is the devil, the punishment appropriate to blasphemy, but he left him to the judgment of his master. Okay, what's going on here? Michael, if you know anything about Michael from Daniel and the rest of the Old Testament, he is a bad dude. And when I don't mean morally bad, I mean he is awesome. He is legit top dog, top tier angel. Right? He's the archangel. He's the protector of Israel. He intercedes for God's people. He imprisons fallen angels. On and on and on I could go. Michael is awesome. But even though he is top A, even though he's top A, and he has every moral high ground to accuse the devil and say, you sorry dog, you don't get to do that, and I rebuke you, devil. Even though he has the right to do that, and probably the desire to do that, and even though Satan has no ground to stand on, Michael still says, not my place, the Lord rebuke you. He's appealing to a higher standard, you see. He's saying, I'm not going to cave on what I want to do, even though I would be right in doing so. I would be wrong if I did it because it's not my place. That belongs to God. You hear what I'm saying? And he's contrasting Michael with these people. These people who are attacked, they're rebelling against authority, they're blaspheming Rome, they're blaspheming whoever, they're blaspheming God, they're denigrating it, they're diminishing it, they're saying we're better, they're worse. And he's saying not even Michael did that, and he was debating Satan. And he still held his tongue. You think we're any better than Michael? No, we're not. Maybe we should defer to the Lord. Maybe we should hold our tongue before we speak evil of people or of things that we do not understand. Or even if we do understand them, it's not our place to point that finger. I think that's what's going on here. So if you are motivated by a godless dream and you want out from underneath that godless dream, which is deceiving you to do all sorts of crazy things, first thing you got to do is you've got to deny your agenda. This is where godless dreams begin. Godless dreamers begin by thinking more highly of themselves than they ought to think. I know better than God. God didn't really say that. God didn't really mean that. If God was in my shoes, he would know that. You have to die to that disposition that says, I know better. I know better than God knows. And God is okay with this because of what I'm going through. Me, 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 me. You've got to get out of that me orientation and die to that. The second thing he does is he defers to the Lord's judgment. He appeals to an authority higher than himself. And even though we don't have the argument between Michael and the devil, we do have an argument very similar. It's in Zechariah chapter 3. If you don't know where Zechariah is, go to the first book of the New Testament, Matthew, and then go back 2 books, okay? You got Malachi, the Italian prophet, and then Zechariah, okay? Zechariah chapter 3, interesting discussion between Satan and, I think, the Lord, Jesus. It's the angel of the Lord, but, maybe not. Here's what he says. He showed me the high priest Joshua standing before the angel of the Lord. This is probably the Lord Jesus, with Satan standing at Joshua's right side. Notice Joshua is the high priest of Israel, so he's representing Israel, but he's a sinful man, and Satan is accusing him. You are a sinful man. You are a terrible man. You did this, you did that. And then the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord rebuke you. May the Lord, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Isn't this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? What's interesting is Jude quotes this section right here at the end of Jude in telling Christians how to respond to these evil people. You need to have mercy on them and rescue them like a branch snatched from the fire. I think what Jude is saying here is to say, Michael did not put himself in a position of judgment, even though he had every inclination to do so, and we should remove ourselves from sitting in the seat of judgment because it is not our place to do so. That belongs to God alone. And so die to your agenda and defer to God's good plan. Leave it in the hands of the Lord. And in this case, in Zechariah, the hands of the Lord was hands of forgiveness. It was hands of mercy. It was that what I'm about is not revenge, it's not violence, it's not destruction, it's not judgment. That day will come, but that day is not today. Today is a day of salvation. Today is a day of mercy. Today is a day of grace. And if you're going to be with me and for me, that's the play we're running. And so put your finger up, stop pointing it, and holier than thou, I know, and you're terrible. You are not God. You will never be God. So put your finger back in your pants and get with the program. And his program is to seek and save the lost. And that's how you die to a godless dream. Now, let me make application, and then we're done because we're out of time. Whoa, we're way out of time. Godless dreams will set you on a trajectory that are divorced from the Great Commission. That's what we do. Making money, American dream, boom, boom, boom. And Jude is saying, as tempting as that may be, God has an agenda, and you want to be on his agenda, but if you're going to do it, you got to do it on his terms. So you got to die to your own dreams and live for Christ and his dream, which is the Great Commission. Doesn't mean you can't be a banker. Doesn't mean you can't be a business owner. Doesn't mean you can't be a teacher. It just means that all of that is oriented around what God is doing, and that is to seek and save the lost. It's the Great Commission. And so for us today, I think there's an invitation, no matter who you are or where you're working or what it is that you're doing, to examine yourself for these sinful inclinations of a godless dream, and to do what Michael did, which was to die to his own desires, to defer to God what belongs to God. You may be wanting to control your future because you think your future's in your hands, and the Lord is saying, no, that's mine. I'll take care of that for you. You may be wanting to hate someone and get revenge because they did you wrong, and the Lord is saying, that's actually my job. Judgment belongs to me. Vengeance is mine. I will repay. The application could look a lot of different ways. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to prayerfully examine your heart and say, Lord, have I been living according to a dream that isn't yours? Have I been pursuing a dream that doesn't belong to you? And maybe you had good intentions. Maybe it was a noble start. But if you're honest, you would say, I have done things I'm not proud of. I've compromised my integrity. I know that this isn't true. I know that I know that the way I'm seeing the world is not the way God sees the world. And I've got to put myself back under His control. I cannot be my own Lord. I am making a mess out of my life. I need accountability. I need the Lord's grace, but I need His wisdom. I need His word back into my life. And if that's true in any way whatsoever, the invitation this morning is to die to yourself, God's plan, and to surrender yourself. And the altar's open if you want prayer to know what that looks like, or maybe you want a conversation with one of our biblical counselors, because when you pursue a godless dream, it can make your life really messy. So maybe you want to start a process. Maybe this morning you would just start the process by examining your heart and saying, Lord, would you see if there's any unclean way in me? Because I do not want to go where these dreams are leading me, but I want to go where you are going. I want to be with you in your effort to seek and save the lost. So would you give me wisdom and discernment to know what that looks like? Receive His word this morning. His truth never changes, but the application looks different based on who you are and what you're facing. And God is big enough to take this general message and apply it specifically and powerfully to your life if you'll let Him. But it begins with the humbling of your heart, acknowledging that you need Him, changing your mind to agree with God about what's what, turning away from your sin and surrendering yourself to Jesus and His righteousness.